Hey everybody, it's Scott with Zenvi AI. Today I am joined by Wayne Gebhardt. He's the broker and founder of Home Saver Real Estate. Wayne has been licensed in real estate since 1999. He's been through a lot of different cycles from boom years, 2008 crash, and obviously today's shifting markets. Wayne is known for his expertise on REOs, foreclosure, short sales, and he's got a unique perspective. So we're interested to talk to Wayne. Wayne, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so let's maybe kind of start there at the beginning. I know you've been in the industry since 99, and obviously you've seen some cycles. What have you learned over the years? Like, what are your lessons being in real estate for 26 years that you've learned?
Well, I was in it prior to the '08 crash. I was in Arizona at the time. Just before that, like I said, I was licensed in 1999. There was a period there where I did mortgages for 3 or 4 years for Sallie Mae home loans. And that was when there was no doc loans. As long as you had a 740 score, we'd give you whatever kind of loan you wanted. Then the government came in, changed all of that. So I went back into the real estate because that mortgage industry started to change so much. And that's when the crash started. And I got in with some of the banks back in Arizona. And what that means is when a foreclosure happens, it goes back to the banks. They're not in the market for selling homes. So they need somebody to kind of do it and keep their ears and eyes open on their asset. And they may be located in Texas, North Carolina, wherever they may be. So they need people with feet on the ground to take pictures, kind of do, reports. And then typically you would get the listing and list it for them. Times have changed since '08, but it's basically the same thing. I'm in it now. I kind of saw it coming 2 years, but I am in Florida. The market's changing everywhere in the country, I would say, except for up north. Let's say upstate New York, those sort of things. The market's still pretty strong. You still get bidding wars up there. Most of the South and West right now are going through some real drastic changes. I wouldn't know if it's a crash or a correction, but we're going to find out very, very soon. If it's a crash, a lot has to do with the government and if they're going to help bail us out. But my job as an agent, my biggest client right now is HUD. When the house foreclosed, the government gets it and they give me an email and say, "Hey, go check this property out." I go there. Typically, it's usually locked out, already vacated and cleaned out and just ready for sale. And they just need to know what the market value is. And they always send an appraiser out there too. So I have my BPO, which is a broker price opinion based on what I can gather on the market. And then they have an appraiser come in. They always go with the appraiser's price, which is typically higher. They don't usually listen to me, but what happens is after 30, 60 days, the bank has to lower their price and eventually come to what my BPO was, and it does get sold. Since I'm more feet on the ground, I know a little bit more about some of the areas than I would have to say that appraiser. Sometimes they'll get an appraiser that's from way down south and you may not know the area or vice versa. And they're just going off of some comps. So basically my BPO typically is the sales price when we do get to sell in that market.
Okay. Yeah, I know when we chatted before, we had talked about, what's perceived in the media, what's really going on. I know you kind of mentioned some spots that are doing well and some others that are under correction. What are signs that you've seen and maybe others have missed as it relates to foreclosures? Obviously, you see it a lot in Florida, but obviously, maybe before, Kelly, you mentioned your boots on the ground. What are you seeing before maybe the media is reporting it?
Yeah, I mean, without throwing politics in it, I watch a lot of stats and I go by numbers. There are people on YouTube and stuff that I really do follow, but there's some really great websites you can go to. Atom, ATOM, that's another great site. You have CoreLogic, that's another great site. When you go to NAR or these real estate sites, a lot of them, they're like 3 months lagging. So the information you're going to get 3 months prior. And right now the market is changing so fast and depreciating that market data is not really going to work in today's market. So I kind of watch things and there's been some indications and I kind of said something about a year ago, 2 years ago, and everybody kind of brushes it off unless you're really watching it. But we have a issue with student loans. Okay. There's 30% of student loans right now in default. You say, Wayne, what's the big deal with that? Well, the big deal is that is an age group of people that potentially are going to want to buy or already bought. And if they're in any kind of financial bind, they cannot refinance their loan and draw out this equity that everybody was talking about that said, hey, the market's not going to crash. There's so much equity in these homes. But if you ruin your credit score and you default on your student loans, you're not going to be able to get a loan. And I kind of saw that happening, and that's kind of what's going to happen. You're going to see it more in October. It's going to be, I bet any amount of money you're going to hear about it more in the news. The other thing is the unemployment numbers. I mean, you don't have to, I mean, everybody talking how it always gets revised. I think the unemployment's a lot worse than it really is. And no matter what side of the government or political spectrum you fall on, I just think they kind of play with the numbers to always make them look good no matter who's in office. But I really think the unemployment's really bad. There's a lot of things that people don't understand, which really, really shock me, is people assume when you hear that the rates have dropped, that mortgage rates are going to drop. And that's a total fallacy. The mortgage rates are not tied to the Fed rate. And when you hear rates are dropping, that is the Fed rate. That is the rate that the federal government drops for government and banks to borrow money at. And it doesn't really necessarily have to do anything with our mortgage rates in the industry. And that's surprising that people don't understand that. They think it's going to drop. I personally don't think it's going to drop too much more, maybe another quarter point, because I think the unemployment and some numbers are going to come out that's so bad that they can't do that. When the market's bad, they're going to raise interest rates. When everything's going good is when they lower the interest rates. And that's the Fed's job to kind of balance it out. But there's so many factors with unemployment being reported, 30% of student loans being in default. Right now, I just saw a stat the other day. The number of default mortgages was almost just as high as when COVID hit right now. But the problem is when it hit that number, the government came in and gave everybody a pass. Now that pass is going to, it's stopping on October 1st. So everybody who is getting a ride or in modification or just playing with the lenders right now, they were supposed to abide by this rule that was placed in the previous administration. This new administration has said no more. So October 1st, that's it. If you're behind your mortgage, there's no more helping. There's no more modification. There's nothing like that. You're going to start to see a lot more foreclosures right now in Florida, Phoenix, Texas. We're at all-time listings. I mean, everybody's trying to sell their home and there's no buyers out there. Everybody has these reasons as to why, but it's a bunch of different things. And if you have so many listings on the market right now and the foreclosures actually haven't really happened or started yet, that's just going to add to it more and it's going to drop prices. So right now, it's not a very good time. If you ask me, I'm not supposed to say it, but I don't think it's a really good time to buy. And if you do buy, I would say ask for everything under the sun. These sellers are still in la la land as far as prices go. So when you go and if you have to buy and you put in an offer, ask for closing costs, ask for credits, ask for things to get fixed, because these sellers can't get their homes sold at the prices they want. And it's very, very negotiable right now. The other big thing is new home sales. These home builders built so many homes and pulled so many permits thinking that everybody was going to keep moving to Florida, keep moving to Phoenix and move to certain areas, and that stopped. So these builders are stuck with a lot of homes on the market. Lennar is one of the biggest ones. I had a client just 3 months ago, bought a brand new Lennar home. They bought down their interest rate to 5%. That's when interest rates were closer to 7%. They paid $25,000 in closing costs, and they also paid 3 months of their lease because they were breaking a lease to move into this home, along with an HOA, a year of paid there. So the new builders are doing whatever they can to get rid of their homes and their surplus of homes right now. Rather than reduce the price and make the market look bad, they're offering all these incentives to buyers. If you're a buyer, those are the two routes I would go: new build, or if you're going to buy, make sure you ask for everything under the sun. The worst thing that could happen is you buy a home today, and in 6 months, because no one knows for sure, 6 months you're upside down. Most people are going to go with an FHA loan, which is 3.5% down, which is really nothing. And you can even ask the seller to cover that. You're allowed to ask up to 6% closing costs. So you virtually can get into a home with nothing down if the seller is willing to help you out with, your closing costs. So in 6 months, should prices drop more, you're going to be upside down in your mortgage. And that's not a good place to be. And I'm trying to tell people that to really be careful when you're actually buying right now.
Yep. Yeah. I know we talked about the home builder buy downs. I did have a question about something we chatted about was short sales. I believe you said that you think those are going to be huge again. Uh,
Yeah.
what, yeah. What should agents and homeowners know to prepare for those?
Short sales, basically what a short sale is you're selling your home because you can't make the mortgage anymore. But your home is worth less than what your mortgage is, what you paid for it. Typically, like even in here in Florida, in the Port St. Lucie area, there are a lot of buyers who bought homes 2, 3 years ago at the very height of the market. There has been a huge depreciation already. So they are upside down and they may have really good interest rates depending on when they bought. But if they have missed a payment or credit card payments, their credit scores are shot. And you're not going to get a refinance. You're not going to get a HELOC or a home equity loan, as we call it, to pull money out to help you out. And that is definitely not the way to go as a first time buyer or any buyer. When you have to pull money out of your house just to pay your bills, you really got to evaluate your finances, is in my opinion. So a short sale is basically you going to your lender and saying, I can't make my payments. I want to sell it, but it's going to be sold for less than what I owe. What's the story? So the process of a short sale is really a lot of going back and forth with the banks. And unfortunately, they won't let you do a short sale unless you're 2 months behind in your mortgage. So if you're trying to be proactive and know that you can't do this and you're up to date with your mortgage, they will not let you do a short sale until you become behind. And right there, that ruins your credit score. But it is a lot easier on your credit score than if you actually foreclosed on a home. So basically, you work it out with your lender. You list your home. Your lender understands what you're trying to do. There's a lot of paperwork involved. And then the lender's going to want to look into comps and stuff like that. And your realtor really has to be on it. And a lot of people don't know how to do it because it hasn't been done since 2008. That's when the market crashed. And that's when everybody had upside down mortgages. So there's a lot of new realtors out there that don't know how to do it or what to do. But basically, it really is a lot of communication with the lender. I mean, you have to get a piece of paper signed by the seller saying that you're allowed to communicate with the lender on your behalf. And you get a sale, and hopefully the bank works with you and they'll let you go and take a short sale. Sometimes they can come after you down the road for the excess amount of money, the difference between what it's sold and what you owe. But in my experience back in '08, there was a lot of times they would sign off and just write it off. And that will state in the letter of the short sale, in the contract with the bank, that they will write it off. They were doing that a lot if you had a first and a second. That second party loan, which would you typically be a home equity loan, had to agree on a short sale. And what was happening is that even if you owed 30 grand on their home equity loan and you were doing your short sale, they would take $1,500 so that the first note holder could close and they would just take 1,500 and walk away. They were supposed to come after you, but nobody ever did at that point. You'd have to talk to a lawyer or accountant and find out what the story is and the legal ramifications if you do that. But obviously they can always probably come after you for the money, but you can get them to sign off on that.
Okay. So I think, a lot of people listening maybe aren't familiar with the REOs and how this all works, and they maybe think that it doesn't really pay that well. Can you break down how compensation commissions typically work in this space?
Yeah, it depends who you work with. HUD is always a 6% interest rate. So it's going to offer a 3% to the buyer's agent and 3% to a listing agent who is working with HUD to get that property. And there's other banks that do the same. And then there's other ones who are called servicers. Now, what happens is a bank, not HUD, but a bank may go and doesn't have the resources to really deal with it. So they send it to a servicer. And that company is the one working on behalf of the bank. And they are going to get either a 1% or a 0.75% of the commission. So as a listing agent, you may get less. Typically, when you're going to a servicer, they're only offering about a 5%, meaning that the buyer's agent is only going to get 2.5 and the listing agent will get 2.5 as well. And also, depending on what state you work in the state of Florida, if you don't declare it, you're considered a transaction broker. And what that is, it allows you to do both sides of the transaction and basically have a fiduciary responsibility to be honest. And there's a few other things, and that you have a fiduciary responsibility to both parties to be fair and honest. So you can collect that whole 5%. So the perception that REOs don't pay is totally wrong. That's not true at all. They typically have a commission always set. So you don't even have to, with the new NAR rule, you're supposed to go to a buyer and say, Mr. Buyer, I want 3% if I find you a home to get paid. And the buyer's supposed to agree on that. Now, when you go and buy a home and you go through the listing or the sales process, you can go to the seller and ask the seller to cover that 3%, and that would eliminate the buyer from coming in with it. Or you can ask for, compensation or something from the seller or the buyer, the listing broker. Ask him to cut his commission, which typically isn't going to happen. So typically a seller will say, okay, I will pay the 3% to the buyer's agent. I haven't really seen too much of the buyers having to come in with money, which was the biggest fear with this new NAR rule, but I haven't seen that really happen. Everybody's kind of playing nicey, and status quo. It's just, there's a little bit more paperwork that has to get signed by a buyer before you walk into a house. And that's pretty much the guidelines right now. And then the main sentence in all the paperwork is that compensation is not set by law and everything is negotiable. And that's really the main sentence that has to be placed in most of the NAR guidelines.
I know we had chatted a little bit about technology, and you've experimented with a few tools. Has there been specific tools, technology tools, AI, that have made a difference in your business that you rely on?
I'm still playing with it. I tried HeyGen, which is basically it'll take a picture of you that you have, you could upload it. Also, if you have a video of you talking, and then you could kind of put stuff together and it'll make it animated so that it looks like your voice is coming out to whatever script you want. I found it to be a little bit weird. So I also playing with Descript. And Descript is a little bit different because what it'll do is take your video that you have, and if you feel uncomfortable in front of the video, you can change it and kind of like, how do I want to say it? You could edit it and edit it as far as your eyes moving and looking straight at the thing, at the camera. So there's a lot of things you can do, but that one's actually a decent one because I always feel uncomfortable in the videos. And that one you can actually change to make you look a little bit more comfortable, your eye contact, that sort of a thing. So those are two big things I'm using. Obviously, everybody's using Chat GPT. I mean, we're all using that. But I think it's just, if you're not on board with that stuff, you really have to because it is moving. And I'm trying to stay up on it. It's just like social media. We didn't all want to keep up with all that stuff. At first it was Facebook, and then it became Instagram. Nobody wanted to go to Instagram because they were all, Facebook's great. And then you got TikTok, and nobody wanted to go from Instagram to TikTok. And it's always going to evolve. So you, as an agent or a realtor, you really have to stay on top of that stuff. I wouldn't say you have to be an expert on anything, but you really need to have a little bit of knowledge. Obviously, posting every day for your business or your sales. If you could do a podcast, that's great. But anything that'll get your name out there just for hits and awareness in your community is a great thing.
Yeah, we've seen that with, excuse me, our clients that are realtors, is that it can be overwhelming because there's so many tools out there and they are evolving so quickly. It's just about having a plan, because it's kind of, when you do it ad hoc, it's really difficult to be consistent with it. So if you can go, hey, have a social media plan or a CRM tool, these different tools that they seem overwhelming, but once you get a system in place, it's not that difficult. So I was going to ask you about that too, as far as AI. How do you see AI? Obviously, we talk about ChatGPT, but where do you think it affects REOs and foreclosure space specifically? How do you think AI affects that industry now?
It could, like, I have to do a BPO every 30 to 60 days, depending on the bank. And that's a broker price opinion. So the asset manager may be in Texas, wherever, and, they want an update because it's not selling. So they want to know what the market's doing. AI can pretty much do that if you know how to work it properly. It could find all the recent comps. It could find stuff very similar to the subject property you're trying to sell. So that's going to be a huge one, that AI can actually do that. I don't know if the banks, how receptive they're going to be at first to doing that stuff, but eventually I think they're all going to do that. So maybe the BPOs and all that kind of stuff will go away for us as an REO agent, but somebody still has to go to the property. Somebody still has to change the keys. Somebody still has to find out all the HOA information. Like this morning, I got one Friday a condo in Boca Raton, and it has two HOAs. One's a master and one's a just a regular HOA, but they're self-managed, and trying to find the people and the principals and the presidents of whoever you need to talk to and finding out if there's any money owed or anything. It's a process. And I don't think AI can do that. They're not going to be able to make the phone calls. So there's certain things, yes, it's going to be very good for us, but there's other things that it's not going to be able to handle. So I don't think we're going to go away anytime soon. I mean, who knows down the road, big time down the road, but I don't think there's anything to be worried about now. Only things that actually can help us if we learn how to use them.
Just speaking on that, if you could design, let's say, if you could design a perfect AI assistant, what would you take off your plate as a broker? Like, what would you automate?
Basically the whole process. I mean, a lot of these big companies will always have a transaction coordinator. And what they do is kind of put all the paperwork together, that sort of thing. Sometimes they're licensed, sometimes they're not. But there's a lot of paperwork that goes into a listing, or even for a buyer. If you're taking a buyer out, you got to find comps, you got to find stuff. And if you want to do it right, you got to present it to your buyer. I think AI, if I could take a seller and take that property, the name and the information from the seller, plug it in, and then have AI do all those things for me. And then every morning shoot me a report that, hey, this is what it should sell for, this, and maybe fill out the MLS sheet. I mean, there's a lot of things that it can do that would be a big help. Also, you have to follow up. There's marketing. Somebody has to call up for the signpost. But everything is like the guys who put in my posts, it's all online. I mean, it's all, I just log into the website. If I could find an AI that would be able to do all that, I mean, that would save so much time, it would be incredible.
Okay, great. As far as generating new business, obviously you're relying on HUD, but what for you over the course of your career, what's been the best way or the most effective way to generate new business?
It all depends on the area. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if you know way back when, but when I first started out, I was trying everything. I always try the what do you call when you're showing up when you open houses, tried that. I never really had a good success on that. My philosophy on the open houses is you always had the neighbors that came in, and the people who do the open houses are typically your newer agents, who your seasoned agents throw them a bone and say, hey, go sit at this house. And you know what? Eventually you do it long enough, like anything, the numbers, you'll get a buyer somewhere along the lines. But for somebody who has business and stuff, I never found it very helpful. The other thing I remember I was doing, I don't know if it was called the talking house. And it was this box, and basically it communicated, and you put a sign out front, the talking house, and they punched in this phone number, and then the box would tell them all about the house. I mean, I tried that too. So there's a lot of things that I tried, but basically I think right now, well, you can do everything you want, but it's basically making awareness, and your sphere of influence is always going to be your best shot. You go to them, and social media right now, I think, is the best thing. Even back then, billboards was another thing. Postcards was another thing. I mean, I've tried them all. Sometimes they work. Calling expires. I've done them too. And sometimes it works. Right now, you're not going to find too many expires because what they're doing is they're taking their properties off the market because they can't get the price that they want. If you're finding an expired right now, it's probably because the seller's got it listed too high. You're more than welcome to take it on, but if they're not going to drop the price, you're kind of wasting your time. So to answer your question, I would still say social media and your sphere of influence. And that would probably be your best bet. I mean, I even did back in the day, it was this guy, he was from Canada, and his whole thing was ads, put ads in newspapers and classifieds. Obviously, that's all changed too. So there's all these things out there, but as long as you're steady with one thing, I think you're better off with one thing than bouncing all over, especially as a new agent. You're going to get all these emails and programs and solicitation, and they're all going to cost money. And I'd be very, very cautious of what you sign up for and where your money's going in the very beginning, because not an easy business. It's tough.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, kind of talking about the future, looking ahead, maybe the next year, year and a half. If we start to see a surge in foreclosures, short sales, that you had mentioned, what advice would you give to agents to maybe capitalize on that opportunity so they're ready?
Well, to get into the foreclosure business is very, very tough. It's kind of a who knows who kind of a thing. Yes, you can sign up for a lot of things, which is another scam. You're going to see right now, if you punch in foreclosures, you'll get all these programs and agents and things that say, "Hey, come to my seminar. I'll get you in with these banks." And it's really not true. If you're not in it already, it's very hard to get into it already. And there's a cost for everything. And a lot of these platforms, like the servicers, they will ask for that cost to join up and say, "We'll get you some foreclosures." But it's very, very rare that you'll get them as a new agent paying that service fee every year for that servicer, that you'll get a REO. Again, you might, but chances are not very good. Now, for a buyer, if you're an agent and you have a buyer, ask for everything under the sun. These banks, when they first list, they're pretty tight on their price. They don't waver too much. You might be able to get five to 10 grand less than the list price for the first 30 days. After the 30 days, anything's game. So don't be afraid to put in a low ball offer. They'll counter you. So try low, because I can't believe some of these offers that some of the banks are accepting on some of my properties. And I'm being honest here, that they've taken 100 grand less than the list price in Port St. Lucie in two of my listings. And I was shocked. Investors are buying them up at that price. And what they're doing is renting them out. And not all foreclosures are in bad shape and need work. That's another fallacy. And these two that I'm talking about are move-in ready. These investors didn't even go and look inside it. Their realtor did everything for them. And what they're going to do is turn around and rent it right out.
What was the bank asking for that they accepted $100,000 less?
We started off at 389. I think the final list price was like 325, and they took an offer of 250. Yeah. Yeah. And it was only 4 years old. 4-year-old home. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of these have been vacant for a year or two. Yeah.
Well, Wayne, that's really insightful. That didn't know a lot about what you were talking about there. So thanks for sharing that. If anybody wants to learn more about what you're doing or chat with you about that, what's the best way to find out more, talk to you?
You can Google my name, Wayne Gebhardt. That's Gebhardt, or my company, Home Saver Real Estate. And I'm located right now in Florida. I pretty much work east to west, the south part. I don't go down to Miami. I don't go further north than really Orlando. But I do have houses listed up there towards Orlando, and I have them down south by Boca Raton. So if you have any questions, go to my website or social media. You'll find me on social media too, on the Home Saver Real Estate. Shoot me a DM. Be more than happy to answer any questions. But the market's changing. I think in October, you're going to hear more bad news about unemployment. I don't think rates are going to drop too much, so don't hold your breath. And even if they do drop, you're not going to see buyers coming out of the woodwork, because it has to get below 5%. And I don't think that's going to happen for a long, long time, if it even does anymore.
Awesome, Wayne. Well, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
You got it. All right. Have a great day, Scott.